Hello again and welcome back. I am Jared Case, curator of film exhibitions at the Dryden Theater and the George Eastman Museum. And we are still trying to give you things, quality things to watch at home. So this is another streaming recommendation, although not very unlike the ones that we've had before. And I've got a special guest here with me today to talk to you about that. Please welcome Selznick graduate from the year 2000, Katie Trainor.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Jared.
Katie has been at the Museum of Modern Art for several years now. Can you tell us about your position and what you're doing at the Moma right now?
Sure. Several years is actually 12 years. Oh my God. And yes, I am the collections manager at Moma. And what that means is I manage our preservation facility in Pennsylvania, where there's 3 people working, oversee our preservation pipeline, our film loan program, and also now the circulating film library. So yeah, that's a lot.
And you have been a projectionist for decades, which I think really informs a lot of the work that you do and have done in the past. As a matter of fact, I think this month you'll be missing Sundance again and all the stress and excitement that goes along with that. But you've also been involved with home movies for quite a while.
Yes, actually, yes. I am one of the co-founders of Home Movie Day and the Center for Home Movies, which is not a physical place, but it's we always say Center for Home Movies lives in our hearts, but it's a nonprofit organization that promotes the everything home movies. And Home Movie Day sits under that umbrella. Yes. So we've been doing that. Home Movie Day started in 2003. So it's in its 17th year. And people did have some virtual home movie days this year during the pandemic, which was really nice.
And this greatly informs what we're going to talk about today. There is an exhibition up at Moma that you are very involved in. Can you tell us about that and how it's extended online?
Sure. It's called Private Lives, Public Spaces. And this was an exhibition that was put together for the museum's recent re-expansion opening. The museum reopened after a 3-month closure in 2019, in the fall of 2019. So a new building was built, and so the galleries were expanded, and and the whole way of coming to see art was re-envisioned. Going through the galleries, it was no longer departmental. It became chronological and thematic, the way to see things. So you would see a film with a painting, with a photograph, with a sculpture. So in addition to that, in the new galleries, the Titus 1 and Titus 2 galleries, which were called the Merida galleries, were also renovated. And those galleries are the spaces outside the movie theaters at Moma, and our 2 main movie theaters. So, and what usually happens in those galleries is always film related. So they wanted to reopen with something film related, and we had this idea. Well, mainly Ron Magliosi, who's a senior curator here, knew of my interest in home movies and amateur film, and we've always discussed it. But he had this great idea to put these films in these spaces. So we started talking about this in 2017, and it took over 2 years for us to work through and view. We viewed over 600 films, and we ended up programming over about 200 in the exhibition, and digitizing 200 films. Nothing is projected on film, it's all digitized and on monitors. It totals about 47 hours of film. If you were to come back and watch everything in its entirety, you will have watched 47 hours of film. So the way we went about this it was myself, Ron, Brittany Shaw, who's a curatorial assistant, and Ashley Splinterton, who is our collection specialist. we all we would meet once a week and sometimes more, and in our small screening room on our floor here called the Mayor Room, and that's where we keep small gauge projectors, 16 and Super 8. So that's another way my projection skills came in handy. So I ended up always being the projectionist because I know how to handle a lot of that film. And we would sit and just watch movies and talk about them and create lists and just and then sometimes some of the other projections would do it. So we did that for a long time, just watching a lot of film. And over the years since I've been here, because of my interest in home movies and amateur film, I've been slowly excavating all the home movies that I find in the collection and just making note of them. And so when this came about, we had a base of what I had found. But as we started delving into the database, and I should also mention, during this time, we were doing a database migration. So, and that was helpful because things were popping up as we were going through records, and we were able to do more searching and more creating reports and lists because of this migration. So that was helpful. And with more eyes on it, the four of us and Ashley and Brittany, we were starting to use keywords that might have been mentioned, and anything that said, was Super 8, regular 8, or 16 and said unidentified and they were small gauge. We just started really looking through everything and found some gems. A lot of these films come in through other collections sometimes. So, and they tend to get relegated to the back burner as you're accessioning and as you're going through the collection. So we were able to look through those and find a lot of interesting film. And we had already some significant collections. I should just talk a little bit about the exhibition. It's kind of categorized.
I think even before we get to the exhibition, I'd love for you to talk about the importance of home movies and the extent to which they exist and how important this exhibition is in bringing them not just to the audience that they were created for, which is generally family, but to a larger audience and under umbrellas of themes and how that works.
Yes. Yes, the home movies, and you can read this in the curatorial or on the wall label, but there is a curatorial statement by Ron Magliosi where he calls, he refers to this quote that Jonas Mekas said, and let me read it to you because it's very poignant. It says, "The day is close when 8mm home movie footage will be collected and appreciated as beautiful folk art, like songs and the lyric poetry that was created by the people. Blind as we are, it will take us a few more years to see it, but some people see it already." And that was Jonas Mekas in The Village Voice in 1963, and it could never be more true. And that was that quote guided us as we were going through all these films. And then Ron was, this people's cinema and just, and as I explained to him about, all the different home movie days and all this film and discovering all these films, he just, he's like, this is like the 20th century art form of movie making. This is the largest body of film. And a lot of it's unseen, we forget that from, when small gauges were born, 16 was born in 1923, and then regular 8 in 1932, and then Super 8 in 1962 or 63, and up until the late 70s, early 80s, that was it. It was all on film. So there's all these reels, and there's still tons of film to be of people's home movies that are in attics and basements and that are yet to be discovered. And so it spans in terms of the categories. And there were cinema clubs, amateur cinema clubs were created, and they got a little more creative with making their own, more edited and putting titles in. And you had the people that traveled and did travel logs and just captured places they went. And you have the families that bought into the package. You get the camera, the projector, the screen, and the book, and Kodak's book on how to make home movies. And some people really took that to the letter, and they really went all out. Like, as an example, one of somebody we discovered at a home movie day was Robin Barstows, and he was an educator in Connecticut, and that was his hobby, making home movies. And he would make titles, and he would edit them and then narrate. And since then, one of his films been named to the National Film Registry, Disneyland Dream. So Disneyland Dream, you can watch that on archive.org. That was named to the National Film Registry. Anyway, so yes. And then there's, what typical people think of typical home movies. Birthday parties, parades on Main Street, Christmas mornings. And there's definitely a lot of that, and then which some people love to delve in and study. And people forget that when not forget, but looking at these home movies, you can look at them different ways. You can look at them historically, or as entertainment. You can look at them sociologically, anthropologically. People can go back and watch behaviors of people. If they watch 5 hours of parades on Main Street, I'm sure a historian or anthropological person, they would really have a lot to look at, in terms of behaviors and actions and stuff like that. So, and it's so innocent, they're not tainted, they're pretty innocent in their observations. And you definitely see a lot of boring stuff, I'm not going to, and bad cinematography, blurriness, and you see so many people waving. As we were going through all these films, we just because of the selection we started looking at and that we had available to us, Ron made a comment. He's like, if I see one more kid diving into a pool, I'm just nope, we're not showing any kids in pools in this exhibition, and then we kind of joked. We were like doing a unofficial tally. All right, now how many okay, that was how many nuns did we see? How many accordions? How many so there's things that you see repeat, but also a lot of great gems. And it's interesting watching films, at home movies were meant to be watched at home, gather around the projector and with sometimes people play music, sometimes there was always commentary, I'm sure. And that was the one thing we've done with Home Movie Day is we really encouraged from the get-go while we were showing these films is to talk about them, and people shout out, do you recognize anybody? Do you recognize this place? Do you, it just got dialogue going, which was a really great thing. And because of that, some things were identified and some locations were identified. So very similar to how, Rick Prelinger does his Lost Landscape films. And that's what, when he screens those films, he encourages people to shout out and talk as they're playing, which is wonderful. And those you can see on archive.org too, I think. That was going to be one of the resources I mentioned, in addition to the films that are on the virtual views here on the magazine at moma.org. And that's the selection that we have. There's some other resources that I'm happy to share for people to watch more amateur film and home movie footage.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that you mentioned. You said it is the art form of the 20th century. It's you can make the argument that the most famous piece of film in history was a home movie. shot near the end of 1963. And the
Mhm.
fact that there was somebody there taking that footage and how important it's been to the country's history is
That is
fascinating.
the most famous home movie is the Zapruder film. Yes. And that was shot on a regular 8 camera. Yep. And um, interesting about that film is that when it's developed, because of the regular 8 camera and the camera itself, that I can't remember the exact model. I did know that, but I should write that down. Because of the regular 8 film was 16 millimeter film, split
Mhm.
and then attached. So there's you can see there's emulsion in between the sprockets. So there's actually footage that was not seen in the typical frame. So that was one thing that helped with um, that film. But yes.
And I'm always fascinated, mostly from interacting with you and other people from Center for Home Movies, about the studies that are born out of this discipline. And it's not so much particular films, but as you say, as you watch more and more, you get a sense of what was important to people from that time. Vacations, what they shot on vacations, what was important in their lives, the important things that they decided, because they still had to determine, they only had a limited amount of film. They had to determine what they were going to shoot. So it had to have a certain significance within their lives. And as you say, the cinematography is not the best. They're not trained, but they do focus on specific things. And I love the idea that you can get a sense of humanity, or at least the American middle class, at some point by what they're pointing their camera at and how they're doing it.
Absolutely, yeah. For those that read the book, the Kodak book, you get a little more sense of that because they understand more with the footage that they have. But especially when the cartridges came into play, which was more like plug and play instead of spooling a roll and threading it through the projector, which is mainly the earlier, like the 16 and the earlier regular 8 cameras. But then they came up with these, Kodak came up with these cartridges which made it easy. You just pop them in, and those were 3.5 minutes of footage is what you had. So and I'm also a fan of the footage that is at the very end and the very beginning. When you think it's just up to speed, but you still capture things. But there's one film that, when you talk about it like that, that's in our exhibition, and that is called The Departure of Guernica, which is the museum for the Moma for the longest time held Picasso's Guernica, huge painting, to keep it safe during their wars in Spain, for fear that someone would have destroyed it. So they kept it here at Moma. And then when it was ready to go back, there was a film, not a film conservator, a painting conservator, and her friend who was a staff photographer. And it was all kind of done, not on the DL, but like they didn't make a big deal about doing this because they didn't want to, this was in the early 80s.
Right.
But just this woman, Annie, and her friend Kate, they were like, oh, let's just document this. And so she had this a Super 8 camera, and she just grabbed a bunch of rolls of film, and between the two of them, they shot the whole process. And I wish we could play it on moma.org, and maybe I'll encourage them to do that. But they just did it so perfectly without knowing. Because they actually captured all the important parts of the process, and their last roll of film ran out as the wrapped up painting was like exiting the museum, and I was like, and they did we had them do a narration afterward, to a voiceover, And I just said to them, I was like, you guys did that, like not knowing, you really captured the whole process. And like, and I told them, and they weren't even aware that each roll was 3.5 minutes. And I was like, yeah, you're 3.5 minutes. You guys did that really. Anyway, that just remind, of what you just said.
Yeah, and so that's only one of the 200 films that are in the exhibition. And if people watch this soon enough, the exhibition is open until April. So if you want to go and see the exhibition, you can see all these films. Spend your 47 hours there over a week or so.
I know it's actually very good. The museum's still open, and it's actually a really good time to come because it's empty. It's very. They limit the amount of people that can come in, and it's very safe, and they're very take your temperature, everyone wears masks, and there's sanitizing stations everywhere. So I feel, and it's very directional flow, but it's a great time to come see art.
So before we get into the selections that are online that people can see from their home, talk about the exhibition itself a little more. There is a structure to it. It's not just one reel of film. There are, 50 monitors?
102 monitors.
102, yeah.
Yes, I believe so, yes. Yes. And yeah, so it is in kind of sections or categories. When you walk down, there is the artist film, and that's one thing we didn't mention yet is a category of artist film, and these are artists that are in the collection and artist filmmakers that embrace the amateur aesthetic in making films that they made. So the film selections we chose of theirs were very much like, they were filmmakers that really embraced Super 8 and that kind of aesthetic. So there's that section, and then the celebrity wall, which is where we have the Dali home movie and Aaron Copland, Carmel Myers singing, who was a silent film actress, Enrico Caruso home movie of him coming in and out of the opera, Charlie Chaplin in a Fairbanks. It's called Spanish People at Pickfair, and that's one of the ones you can see online. It's a very strange title because we're not sure why it was titled that, but it's just him and his friends frolicking on the Fairbanks Mary Pickford estate, being funny, dressing up and acting out, and they had and it looks gorgeous because they had at their disposal, 35 millimeter studio equipment. They just brought over a cameraman, so it's beautifully nitrate, shot on nitrate,
right,
transferred. We also have the Chapman Films, we call them. This is a woman who was a very wealthy woman and collector and traveled the world and shot on her 16 millimeter camera all these famous artists, writers, sculptors in their studios. So that you'll see that. And then there's a category called Moma home movies, which is Moma related, like the one Guernica I just mentioned. Right. We have one that's called the Nitrate Cabinet Fires, which is us doing studies of when right before we were building the preservation center in the 90s, in the mid 90s, they did a series of tests with different cabinet manufacturers to determine which one was best to hold the nitrate in case if there was a fire, to see if it could contain it from one cubby hole to the next and things like that. So they, safely did these tests and captured them on film. And it's fascinating because people are like, oh my God, what happens with nitrate? And you're like, yes, it is.
Yeah, I've actually seen some of those, and
yes,
I compare it to jet fuel. It's basically
exactly
what it looks like. It's shooting out of there with such force.
It is. It has to burn itself out. You can't put it out by any chemical or water or anything. So, and then within the Moma home movies, there's, a bunch of films that Moma shot internally like the moving day at Moma, when the museum moved from the row houses on 54th Street to the newly built first building right there. And then as you go downstairs, that's where you get into your more, not traditional, but what most people think of home movies is we have a huge family wall, which is varying size monitors set up to look like, to replicate or the wall of photos in many people's houses when you go into their house, and it's either like on the stairs going up the wall and the stairs of the wall going into the kitchen, like you have the wall, people have the photo wall. And so it was meant to do that, but with moving images. And then we have a travelogue or ethnographic section. That's the more people traveling and capturing different peoples and places. And yeah, those are the basic categories of the home movies.
And you mentioned some of the ones that you can find online. It's the virtual views, right?
Yes, it's virtual views, not our virtual cinema, which is two different things right now. Virtual views is what the museum started with early April, as we went into quarantine and we're deciding how to do this. Virtual views was born through the magazine, and there's a lot of things you can watch on that. But this was the inaugural virtual views, was the home movies.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, it was because as people were figuring out, especially for people like us, that work at museums and have actual theaters where we have people come in and they could no longer, what could we screen online? And so we had to really delve into what was already digitized, obviously, because we couldn't send anything out to be digitized. So, and that had all been done. So it was easily accessible. A lot of it was easily cleared rights because it's in the public domain, or we had the rights for them already.
Right.
And so, yeah, that one became a very, that was the first one, and it was pretty successful. Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the artist films, I believe you called them, the Chapman one, which you explained. I thought the Aaron Copland one was very interesting because it was almost set up shot by shot. Like there was sort of an establishing shot where he would go into a diner, and then it would look into on him as he's sitting at the table there.
Yes.
And was that set up on purpose that way? What were they trying to document?
I looked at that film, and it appears as if it was in camera edited.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, because we didn't have something with splices, obviously, but, and a lot of people, and just as a quick correction, that isn't the artist film, that is the celebrity film.
Celebrity film, yes, thank you.
All right, I just want to make that distinction.
Yes.
But that one, and people, you have to remember or remind people that a lot of the small gauge amateur film was shot on reversal film, which is what that means is it's the film you put in the camera is the film you actually get back after it's been processed. So it's not like you get a negative and then you make a new print, and then edit it, but you can edit the reversal. But I think that appeared to be in camera edited, but who knows? I mean, and it's just someone saying do this and shoot it, and then they stop, and then they have them do something else and they shoot it. So whoever shot that, we don't know too much about the background on that.
Yeah. And the Dali home movies are on there as well.
Yeah.
But then we move into some of the more traditional home movie formats. There was one that was a color film that was shot of a father and his daughter at various places, including on a rooftop in New York City.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how we can identify where that is. I'm sure we can get somebody to do that. Like Anthony could probably do it, right?
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Film forensics. Have Anthony look at that and see if he could find the location for us. Yeah, that one's beautiful. That one came in through the Charlie Trainor collection. And you also see another Charlie Trainor film, which is he actually shot, which is the 6th Avenue subway.
Right.
That one. Charlie Trainor was a filmmaker and collector, and he made industrials and shot for the army for a long time, but then made his own, but it also had a lot of home movies. And Ron Magniosi, again, really courted him he really wanted that collection for Moma, and worked on him for, became friends with him, interviewed him. There's a really good, if you look it up, there's a very good interview Ron has with Charlie Trainor that's on JSTOR. Anyway, that in addition, he gave us his collection. He donated his collection to Moma, and then he also was he went to a lot of estate sales and yard sales. And he had a lot of films. So we have all these unidentified home movies, and that father and daughter one is one of those. We don't know who those people are, but it's beautiful, Kodachrome, gorgeous. It's really lovely.
I don't think this is, well, you can tell me whether it's Kodachrome or not, but there was the one shot was called Liberty Park.
Yes.
Yeah.
I say it like that because that is my favorite film in the entire exhibition. It is. It's made by a filmmaker, because we had the name Victor Ginsburg, and we did a lot of due diligence trying to find him. It came in not through him, but a collector who had other films, but that's what was on the can. And when we asked this collector, do you remember this guy? And he's like, no. So he doesn't remember how he got it. And we thought we found him. And then we described the film to him, and he was like, no, I didn't make that. I didn't. We still think it's him, but whatever. Anyway, that is amazing. And, we've had a lot of requests since it's been on virtual views, and people can see it. We've had a lot of requests to have it in documentaries and stuff, but unfortunately we can't because we don't know, we don't have the right. I mean, we
right.
I don't think it would be ethical to do that because we don't have the clearance for that, but it is this beautiful film where we think it's this filmmaker filming these kids, and I don't think he knew them. It feels very somewhat staged, but not really. It feels very improv, and I really encourage people to watch that whole film. And then he does cut to some lower Manhattan shots, but the footage with the kids at the park and then doing the dancing and is really just breathtaking. And I'm like, still to this day, I'm like, I want somebody to find out, because in one scene you think this girl who's kind of like the leader is holding something, and you would think people are like, oh, it's her cell phone. No, it was a transistor radio. It was a transistor radio. And I'm like, oh, and they're obviously listening to something. And I want to find out what they were listening to. That's like, I really want to find out what they were listening to on that transistor. But that is one of my favorite films.
Yeah, that one, I agree. It does seem at least partially set up, because it opens with this girl with her back to you doing a tap routine on the concrete.
I know.
The other way, and she does it a couple of other times during the film. So it seems like that was something that was rehearsed and put in there. But yeah, there is this spontaneity to it with the other children coming. Yeah. There's two at the beginning, and then it grows to four, and they're doing stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the flags at Liberty State Park, and I believe that's Staten Island, I think. I think it is, or no, maybe not. It's maybe in Jersey City. I'm not sure.
That was 1970s?
Early 80s. 81,
early 80s.
Circa 81, we're not quite, yeah. I mean, that's
on
what
Super
the Edge Code said, yeah. Yeah.
And one of the anchors of this entire exhibition, and also what you can see online, is the Jared home movies.
Oh yes.
Which, am I right? All 3 hours of that is on the virtual views page.
Yes, it is. It is.
And it essentially covers a decade in this family's life, where there was someone that was an avid filmmaker who was just
So it was roughly
documenting.
10 years of the Pittsburgh Hill District, and David Jarrett was a firefighter, we determined, and I don't think he had children of his own, but on this street you see him filming on, you see over the course of all this time, in the street change, and he's very close to his neighbors. There's a lot of community, and there's a lot of parties and dancing, and he really captures a real over the years, his community in that area in Pittsburgh. And there's a good story with that, because that came to us. We got donated by Greg Pierce of Oregon Archive in Pittsburgh, and we ended up. I think we knew the name David Jarrett because it was on the box from what we determined, and Greg didn't know had never found the people or anything like that. But what we did was we looked through. We knew he was a firefighter. We found out through the film forensics what company, and we made phone call, and we had a wonderful fellow at the time working for us that did a lot of the research, and we found out that he was this person. We found his name, and then we ended up just finding a relative. I think it was his niece, and contacted her and gave her the footage. It was really wonderful. So we actually found a family member, and that's like one of the good stories. But, yeah, that is beautiful footage. And when you look at it, and it looks, because it has suffered from some wear and decomposition over the years, but I think it makes it even more poetic and beautiful.
Yeah. So I think there's 9 that are actually on the virtual views page. And there's a couple of other contextual videos, how to see video, as well as an introduction to the exhibition by yourself and your compatriots.
And then there's also an interview with our chief curator, with Ron.
Good.
So you can watch that as well.
And we will post the links to all of those down in the bottom here for the YouTube video that we're putting up. So you can go directly to those and find out where they are. But I was interested in we've thrown out a couple of dates here. You graduated in 2000, and the Home Movie Day started in 2003. Is there a direct connection between your time here at the Selznick School and your involvement in the home movie, or did you bring that with you?
No, actually, I got more. When I was before I went to Selznick, I dabbled with. I had a Super 8 camera and shot film, so there was an interest there. When I first moved to Boston in the early 90s, I took a class at Mass Art, a Super 8 filmmaking class. And I have some film like that, and but never really made anything. But then, after the Selznick School and going to a lot of media conferences and, meeting different people, and it was at the Boston conference in 2002, I think it was, that or Portland before that, where there was a small gauge task force, and that was and so I, didn't really know many people, but I decided to sit in and got very involved. And so it was really that started all this. And then in 2002 at the conference, the 5 of us broke out to go have a beer, and we just started talking about home movies. And because Dwight, and when I say the 5 of us, it's Dwight Swanson, Chad Hunter, Brian Graney, and Snowden Becker. And Dwight had a long interest in amateur small gauge film, so we just started talking, and that's where the idea was born.
I will mention that 4 of those people have some connection to the George Eastman Museum and the Selznick School.
Oh, they do. Yes, yeah. They do. Yes. 3 of which were graduates. Yes. One that worked there. We consider kind of Snowden sort of not an alumni, but she's kind of.
We'll give it an honorary certificate.
Yes.
So is there something that you took from the Selznick School that you still use to this day? from that program?
Sure. Going through I liked going through all the different rotations in the museum. So it really gave me a base of understanding for the different departments and of a museum and how they function and how they work with one another. The registrar, library, archives, and then, obviously the Eastman Museum or Eastman House at the time isn't as big as MoMA and doesn't have like a painting and sculpture department and prints and drawings, but still like gave me a real understanding of that and community of people to ask and follow up with. I mean, I went into the Selznick School with already film handling experience, so I had that benefit, but I did appreciate the further study in that, and the right way to do things. And so that I take that with me too.
It's always such a great pleasure to talk to you, Katie. I appreciate you bringing this entire sort of field to our audience's eyes and putting some films up online so that they can at least dip their toe into that. When I was inspecting films and people would bring in home movies, and I always tried to express to them how important this film of theirs was to them because they were the intended audience, to pass down through the generations. Do you have any advice for people that have home movies now, what to do with them?
Yes, don't throw them away. And when you transfer them, don't throw them away because you might need to transfer them again. So, and people have found that out over the years that did it on VHS and now, and then now that's all they have. And, there's technology has changed over the years that you can really get a lot more out of the image transferring them now. So, and, name a family archivist. If you can identify a family archivist, it's going to, pass, kind of keep these kinds of things and then pass them on over the years. And there's a lot of great resources online on the Center for Home Movies website page if you want to find out more how to take care of your films at home and things like that. So go to Center for Home Movies. So yeah, just don't throw away your film and look at the resources available to keep them safe. Oh, and in terms of the other resources, just quickly, there's just there's tons, but just off the top of my head, if people want to see more home movies in amateur film,
right,
they can, I've mentioned it already a few times, archive.org. It's just amazing. Just go to archive.org. There's a lot of categories of film you can watch, and amateur film, home movies, and many other things. Also AV Geeks, Skip Eltzheimer, has a huge amateur and film ephemeral collection, and he's often doing on lunchtime screenings of his films. So if you want to watch more of that film, go to AV Geeks. Tammy, the Texas Archive of Image, is a great resource, and Northeast Historic Film in Maine. So those are just some on the top of my head. And include those links too.
Thank you so much.
You. No, thanks for having me. It's always great to talk about this.
Well, before I let you go, I've got a little questionnaire that I've been doing with people I've been talking to, knowing that most people can't get back into the theater right now, but are sort of jonesing to get back into it. Wanted to prime them with some questions and some memories from each individual person I'm talking to.
Oh.
So I've got 5 questions if you've got time.
Sure. I've got time.
What is your first cinematic memory?
This is a question I often ask people because I love this question. My first cinematic memory was Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I just remember being like, I sat in the front row, and I remember being so like, what is going on, that I didn't want to get up to go to the bathroom or get popcorn. I was like glued to my seat.
Was there a hometown theater or one that you went to regularly? Do you have memories of?
No, sadly, no. I mean, there is one in Turnersville, New Jersey, but then we moved from there. So I moved around a little bit throughout my formative years. So no, but as an adult, yes. Harvard Film Archive, Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and the Brattle in Cambridge. Those
That's
three.
3 of them all that you're spending your time at.
Yes.
Well, what is your favorite sensory experience when you go to the cinema?
I guess the smell of popcorn, but that can't apply now because especially because most of the movies I see are usually at Moma and you can't have popcorn. So I wouldn't, sensory experience I don't really have here. No.
Yeah. Where do you sit when you go to the theater?
On the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
And mid to mid back.
Right side, left side?
No preference, but usually right more than left.
I just wondered if you had to have your right arm free or something.
No. But I do like the aisle. Same thing with planes. Aisle seat.
Last one. As we're still sitting at home, is there a book that you can recommend, either about film or film history, or maybe amateur film that you can recommend for people to read?
Ooh, that's a good one. Amateur film. I mean, I there's a bunch, but the book that just is popping in my head is Alan Cattell's book because it gives the real history. It's not about the movies themselves, but about the equipment and the background. And I just love that book. I refer to it a lot for information, but also for some stories. But yeah, Alan Cattell's home movie book. There are others there, but I can't think of them right now.
That was the one that immediately came to mind when we're talking about this subject as well. So
yeah,
I'm not surprised.
And I got to know Alan really well, so he's kind of dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, Katie Trainor, it has been a pleasure catching up with you.
You too.
I hope to see you again sometime when travel becomes a more real possibility, either at the Nitrate Picture Show or MIA Conference or somewhere else.
I know, me too. I look forward to that day.
You have the most beautiful background that we've had on these interviews.
Oh, yeah. It was too bright, so I had to put one curtain down, but it makes for a nice cinematic effect. All right. Thanks,
Thank you so much. And for the audience, please come back and watch some more of these conversations for some more streaming suggestions.
Yes. All right. Have a great day.